that we don't always need facts and figures, rigid, like very masculine, very driven by sales. Actually, things can be in other ways. Like, you know, maybe we put out a number of people that we speak to about the franchise rather than the number that we have to have submitted and signed on the dotted lines.
All right, Karen, I am so thrilled to have you on. I know you and I just spent 15, 20 minutes talking and getting started, and then realized we were not recording the podcast at all. So we're taking two, and I am so excited to have you on because, like I said, these are my favorite episodes. I love hearing real life, real human beings. We're all human beings, but sometimes it has this feeling of when we hear it from somebody else and we hear what somebody else is doing in the world and we hear what amazing things they have going on, it makes it feel more real and more possible. I know for me, hands down, that's one of my number one things is when I can get in the room with other people doing things that I want to be doing, it just makes it feel so much more possible for me than when I'm sitting behind my computer by myself. So I am so excited to have you here and to be able to share your story, hear about what you're doing in the world, and make your story be an inspiration to you, listener, who's listening in today. So Karen, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. No pressure with that big introduction.
But it's so true though. It just makes such a huge difference when we can hear other people and hear their stories and what they're doing. So I would love for you to share a little bit about what you are doing in the world and what amazing things you have going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from sunny Scotland. It is actually sunny here, which is amazing, as you can see. But I've got a little business called Mind Marvels. We work in schools and nurseries, which are kindergartens in America. And we basically provide mental health tools and strategies to young people to support them with feeling calm. And it's really started from a small seed where I was a teacher before, really stressed out, not enjoying life, really didn't know what mindfulness was, to then taking me on this full journey of discovering how to be calm myself and then how to help other people, in particular young people. We're now just about to franchise the business UK-wide, which is super exciting because it just means we can help more and more children. And these are the skills that I know me and you, Renee, would have loved as children when we didn't have those outlets or those ways to feel calm.
Yeah. Oh, so much so. It's so true too. I think it's so important for kids, especially as an OT, and that's my world. But even as looking at adults, there are oftentimes skills that we were not taught and we didn't learn. And now as adults, we're learning them. And it would have been amazing and wonderful if we had learned them 30 something years ago and had those tools all the way through. So I think what you do and the story that you have and how you're showing up is absolutely amazing. Something that's so needed and so valuable. And I've just loved over the last couple of months, getting to know you, getting to know your journey and your story, learning about what you're doing and how things have just totally shifted for you. And you've made such a massive shift and change. And I just wanted to highlight that and share on the podcast because it does make it feel more real and more possible for so many other people when they hear it. So I would love to know a little bit about where you were 5 or 6 months ago, before you and I'd even met. I know you've been a part of Cycle Advantage 101, and then you joined into your Cycle Advantage, but way back before all of that and before we really got to know each other, what was kind of life look like? What was your business look like? What did everything feel like for you at that point?
Absolutely. There wasn't much of a purpose. I didn't really know where things were going. It was kind of up in the air. I knew I wanted to franchise, but I didn't have any plans or a real way to move that forward. In fact, often I'd put myself in the way of trying to move that forward. But I think life was quite chaotic and I'd often feel a failure because previously I would try things like Miracle Morning or try other sort of well-being things you should be doing a HIIT session every day. And although these things aren't directly to do with the business, they definitely affect your well-being, which then in turn, obviously contributes to how you're feeling to then put that into the business that day. So I definitely had this sort of resistance to trying things that were new because I thought, well, what's the point? I can't sustain anything. So when sort of your Cycle Advantage came along and it was all about actually you don't need to do the same things every day, or you don't need to have the same exercise regime every single day. It was a real relief to me, because all our life we're told, especially by masculine people, that we need to do the same things consistently every day. And it's not about letting go of things, but sometimes it's about doing things in a different way to actually align with how we might be feeling at that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you said that, because I think it's so powerful. It's like, I think that there's this idea that if we're not doing something consistently every single day, that we're letting it go. And I think what you just said was so powerful, in the sense of like, we're not letting it go. We're just doing it in a different way. And I think that is a huge revelation that I've had, and that I think so many women that I work with have had, is that sense of, it's not about being a failure or not doing it or not being consistent or whatnot. It's like the consistency just looks different. It doesn't mean it's every single day. It looks just different. And I love that you brought up the idea too of those things that you were using, things like the miracle morning, or some of those other, strategies that we've been told that we need to do the same thing every single day. Just doesn't always work, right? Like, you're going to feel those days where you are excited to get up and work out. And there's going to be those other days when you want to sleep in and hit snooze. And like, even this week, it's like the wrong week, but I've been like, my body's all wonky right now, but I've been sleeping like 9 to 10 hours every night. And I'm like, I don't know what my body is doing right now, but it clearly needs a lot more sleep. And being okay with letting your body do that, instead of hitting it down and saying like, you're supposed to be up at 5 o'clock every morning. You're supposed to be doing this every single day. And how that is such a radical shift. So I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but like that idea of like, was kind of honoring your body and listening to what your body needs a part of how you were living before? Or was this something that was kind of new to you? Like, I'm a huge proponent of, your business will only grow to the level of how your body feels and how you're taking care of your body. And your body has to be very well integrated into your business. So was this something you were already kind of aware of and integrating, or was it something that was totally new for you?
Not really. I didn't really know much, to be honest. So every month you would just dread the period coming. Like, that's how I would feel, like just dreading that kind of downtime almost, and then feeling guilty about having downtime, which now just seems so bizarre. But I had cycle synced kind of with temperatures before, just to see when certain times of the month would be, and perhaps like hormonal changes, but I hadn't really tracked how I would feel each week, or how different my body would feel each week, or every day. Let's be honest,
Yeah.
it's not always that consistent. But I think the biggest thing with this has been allowing myself to feel okay with those changes. Before, I might have been like, thinking in my head, why am I so lazy, or why can't I do this? And a lot of the time our role models are masculine, or that, a lot of people that I listen to can be big macho males in the entrepreneur world, and they're great, they've got their place, but they also give that advice that you have to work hard every day, and sometimes would feel a bit of a failure if you couldn't quite match that. So definitely your Psycho Advantage has allowed me to sort of slow down a bit and not feel those guilty thoughts I think we often do feel.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Like, one of the biggest culprits of like taking us down is between our own two eyes, right? Like between our ears, like maybe not our eyes, between our ears, like that spot right
behind
there.
Your eyes.
Behind your eyes. I like know where my brain anatomy is, but how we are oftentimes our biggest culprits, like of taking ourselves down, and how kind of being aware that there are different times. And I even was on the call with somebody this morning and talking about just that awareness of when we're going to be more confident, or when those thoughts are going to come up, when the fears are going to be bigger, and knowing that we're not exactly the same every single day throughout the month, and being able to adjust to that makes such a huge difference. So I know, particularly like for just personal life, right? Like, it has made a huge shift knowing how the cycle really shows up, but like looking at how you run your business, what are some of the biggest shifts that you've made and the biggest ahas that you've had in terms of like integrating your cycle with your business?
Yeah. So I remember maybe week 2, we looked at sort of blocking out times in our cycle. So we had we worked out our phases of when we might feel like more radiant, like that'd be like your connect phase, or times when you maybe just need a little more kind of downtime. So what I remember, we had the big task of like writing everything down that we do in our business and then assigning a phase to it. And obviously that's not concrete, but it starts to give you that basis, right, for like discovering when's best to do tasks. So a really good example for me was I had to get a branding shoot done and I was dreading it. Getting photos done is not something I particularly enjoy. But I remember looking at the calendar, obviously all syncs now to my Google Calendar when my cycle is, and seeing that, at the start of the month was when I'd be probably most likely to want my pictures taken.
Yeah.
So that's when I booked in the photo shoot. So just little things like that. It's not necessarily having this big overhaul, right? Because when we do things that are really new, it's scary and it gets you feel overwhelmed and you end up reverting back. But now what I have is that clear calendar of when I can book certain things in for the business. Like this week I've been so focused on like copy for the website because I'm in that creative element of my phase. And I just love that, because before I probably would have tried to have divided the day up, right, you've got to go and like record something and then you've got to write because I know that this is the ideal time for my creativity. It's just been phenomenal. Like I've done my complete overhaul of my website today, and I think if I'd tried that in other parts of my phase, it would have taken me days and days. Just that constant flow it's just great. It really is transformational, and I know that's cheesy, and I was skeptical. Like, Renee, I'm the first one to say, when I heard about your cycle syncing to your business, I was like, what is this? Because it does sound a bit woo and a bit out there, but it makes so much sense. But the reason that we feel it's woo is because it's not taught in schools. We're not taught this when we start our period, and things are kept really like secret. And I know we've had like loads of talks about kind of trauma and reliving sort of growing up as young women, but it really does stem all back to that, this sort of secrecy and shame. But when it comes to the business, I've just taken the advice like straight on and tried to incorporate it as much as I can, which has been great.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you brought that up, because I recently came across a little meme that was talking about the movie Turning Red and talking about how, I've heard a lot of really negative stuff about that movie, and people, for a variety of reasons. One, some people were talking about like how the character they felt like was being really disrespectful to the mom and the way they portrayed the mom and the daughter and whatnot. But there's also this other element of the movie that is all about her coming of age and like her becoming her own individual and having her period. And like, in the movie, they actually, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's this one scene where the mom like thinks that she's gotten her period. And so she runs and gathers all these supplies and brings it to her, but it wasn't her getting her period. It was her like turning into the red panda. Right. But like that's the first time I think that it's ever been portrayed like that in a children's movie. And there was a lot of backlash on how that shouldn't have been talked about, that shouldn't be in the movie, and like all these things. And it just kind of goes to say what you're talking about is like, it feels so out there and it feels so uncomfortable. It feels so like wrong to be talking about. And like, there's going to be a lot of pushback because it's not something that has been integrated. And it's not, like you said, it feels kind of woo. It feels kind of different because it hasn't been the way we've done things. We've been taught and we've been doing things in this more like logical, linear sort of fashion. And using your cycle is not logical and linear. It's got this flow and a little bit more, I don't want to say loosey-goosiness to it, but there is a little bit more of following like your intuition and following your body and listening to those needs, when in more of that linear, logical sort of realm, sometimes those things are squashed and put off to the side.
Totally. And one thing that really stuck out for me was when you talked about feminine goals versus masculine goals. And that kind of stems back to that, where it is listening to your intuition and it is going against the grain, because many people have said to me in my business, how many franchisees do you want by the end of the year year 1 right up to year 5. And actually I was on a discovery call with a coach the other night, a male, lovely guy, but he was saying you've got to have these numbers and you've got to get them. And I'm thinking, well, I want the right people for the franchise. I don't necessarily, it's not necessarily a numbers game, but to some people so you had spoke about, I had said that I'd always wanted like 30 minutes of exercise every day. And you had said, why don't you break that down and actually say, you want X amount of exercise per month. So you're not, every day you're not like, oh, I failed again. So I've kind of come to that conclusion that we don't always need facts and figures, rigid, like very masculine, very driven by sales. Actually, things can be in other ways. Like, maybe we put out a number of people that we speak to about the franchise rather than the number that we have to have submitted and signed on the dotted lines. So for me, it's really about taking goals and making them more meaningful to like how we conduct our lives rather than that hard number game.
For sure. And I think that just kind of goes to the sense of like, we hear all these numbers, right? Like get $10,000 months, $100,000 years, like $1 million a year. And then what happens is we set our goal on that and we focus so much on that number. And like you said, there's a couple of different faults to that. Like one is that if we don't hit that number, then every month we don't hit that number, we reinforce that it's not possible and that we're not doing it. And then it becomes this like repetitive failure sort of thing. But then also it takes the emotion and the feel out of like, why are we even doing that? What is that number even going to give us in the first place? And so just like you said, like we kind of have to look at numbers, right? Like if you're in business, you have to evaluate your numbers. Like we cannot like eliminate numbers altogether. But like you said, it's kind of looking at it like, what do those numbers mean? And what are we actually looking for? And what is that really the end outcome that we want? And are there numbers that we can focus on that are going to give us more of the feel and the element of like what we really want that matter more? So like I don't know that we've talked about that, but like transitioning from like, these are the people I have to have signed and dotted versus like, these are the number of conversations I want to have, that totally changes the feel, right? It like takes the pressure off of like, I have to close these sales. And it's like, no, we just want to talk to more people and we want to connect with more people. We want to get in front of more people and be with them and have this conversation. And for you, that might've been the element of like taking that pressure off and really getting back into like, the whole element of my business is to spread this message. And if that number shift, like taking it off of the number of franchisees to putting it on the number of conversations, if that changes that feeling and takes that pressure off, then that's going to be more successful in actually reaching that end goal of the number of franchisees anyway. So it really is so powerful when we start looking at like, what is that end piece that we want in our goals and what's the feeling that we want to create along the way, and not just looking at like, am I achieving the end destination, but like, how can I infuse that I've already achieved the goal right now? Yeah.
And it goes against the grain of everything we've learned in business so far, really, because you don't have many women leaders and definitely not any male leaders coming out and talking about this and saying, you don't actually need, obviously I get the numbers game, I know it's important, but if we have a different cycle to how men do, where they can sort of replenish every 24 hours, then we need to take into account how magical like our whole cycle actually is, like appreciating it for what it is, but using it to, funnily enough, its advantage.
Yes.
Yeah, I like the name. I'm getting the name now, Renee.
And honestly, like, it's like those little things, like when those, like, I don't even remember how I was like working with a coach and I was like throwing out a bunch of different ideas and I like threw out Cycle Advantage and I was like, that totally fits. Like, that is it. Like, that works. And I think that that's some of it too, is like coming out with like, when we're in that zone and we're in that flow of like, this is where like you allow your intuition to, now when I look back, I'm like, I would not have named it anything different. Like, I don't know how I could have done it, but I guarantee I was probably in that frame of like when my brain was most in tap with like my intuition and something bigger than me in that moment. And I think that that's one of the biggest, most powerful things that I've learned and discovered through using my cycle in business, is that it takes that pressure off of you to be the creative and the person coming up with everything. And it like creates like all allows you to tap into something much bigger.
Yeah. And what's even more amazing is sometimes my cycle doesn't quite line up. And, you know, sometimes you're at the tail end of like your creativity and you're still going with it. But I think that actually makes it more exciting sometimes, that we still can't fully predict, you know, like you've talked as well about sometimes you have a bit of an irregular cycle or something goes amiss, but that's okay as well, because we don't then need to feel angry at our bodies or anything, you know. It's not like, oh, that's not in the calendar this week. It's just about giving yourself that freedom and flexibility. And there was something else you had touched on as well about the sleep cycle, which was really interesting for me, because that was all about like I can't really remember, it was the REM, wasn't it, versus the number of hours that you're awake. You need to try and correlate that when you wake up, so you're not in like your deep pattern of sleeping. So that's been really, really good for me, because you can download little apps that tell you like when the ideal time to wake up is, and I got my little like Aura ring as well, so
oh my goodness, I want to hear so much more about that, because like now that the Aura ring is matched up with natural cycles and they like take your body temperature on its own, which that's a whole nother thing too. Like I've read, there's a book called The Power of When, which also is written by a man. And so a lot of it is very masculine. It's tapping into like your body has different times, like that we're biologically cued for different things. So like, but he puts it in 4 categories, right? Like you're either a bear or a wolf or I don't even remember, but like, you know, bears, I'm going to just totally botch this, like on his like timings. But like, for instance, like a bear likes to sleep more and they need more sleep. So they go to bed earlier and they wake up later, and they like to eat more in the morning versus the wolf who likes to eat more at night. Like there's this whole thing, but right. So he categorizes people into these 4 different prototypes or archetypes or whatever they are, but it's all based on when, that we all have biological makeups of like when we're supposed to be doing different things. And a big part of it is temperature. And so knowing like when your body temperature drops in the evening indicates that you're more likely to go to sleep earlier or later in the evening, and like all these different things. So I've been fascinated about wanting to track my temperature more often. And also now that they've got the Aura ring that tracks your temperature automatically with natural cycles, and being able to track your basal body temperature and being able to understand ovulation. I think that any tool that you can use like this that allows you to learn more about what's actually happening in your body. Like I would gather that a lot of women don't ovulate every month and they have no idea. And I think that the more that we tap into just learning and understanding about your body gives you more tools and more information to be able to talk with your doctor, to make adjustments, to make, you know, to work with a functional nutritionist. Like I've had lots of different functional nutritionist people on the podcast, and they are a wealth of information in looking at how your body actually runs. And the more information you have of like what's actually happening on those subtler sort of levels makes such a huge difference. And I have yet to join into the Aura Ring Club, but I think I probably will have to like pick your brain about it, because I think it is another one of those tools that could be really helpful for you to dive into a little more.
And I'll be honest, like I'm lazy. So if I can find a way to do something like with the temperature every morning, I would sometimes forget, or, you know, you wake up and then you remember and then it's too late because you've already been up and about. So for me, like just wearing the little like ring, it's a little big, but it's fine. It's lightweight. All you do is just wear it and charge it every 4 or 5 days. And it basically takes everything for you. So it does all like your temperatures, like your heart rate, how you're sleeping. So it shows you the graph of like your REM and all your different sleep stages, which is also quite relevant to your cycle advantage, because you spoke about that too. But I think it's just taking that time now. We all have Fitbits and watches, and I know I've got my Apple Watch as well, but how many of us as women are actually tuning into the menstrual cycle or kind of the temperature part of that? I don't know if many of us even know really what it all means.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to take that notice, because again, it knows when you're unwell, depending on temperatures and how you're feeling. So I definitely think it's worth considering if you are a bit more laid back like me and not easy to remember things.
And honestly, I think that's the number one reason I would do it. Like I did do basal body temperatures when I was trying to get pregnant years ago, but I'm like, I don't want to do that every single day now. No. Like I want something that's simple and easy and that's just going to do it automatically for me. Yeah. I mean, that's where I've gotten to the point where even tracking stuff in my cycle for my business, it's very much on repeat in my calendar. And it's not going to be as exact as listening to your body and that's where I think the Aura Ring is a really helpful tool to be able to do that more on the automatic sort of space and not have to cognitively be thinking about it all the time. Cause let's be real, we've got 1.5 million other things on our minds all of the time. There's got to be ways to simplify some of this. So, Karen, we have talked about so much and this has been so helpful. Do you feel like there's anything that we've missed that you want to make sure that you share today? Or do you feel like we've pretty well covered everything? I think even though this is kind of your Psycho Advantages sort of aimed at business mums or moms, as you guys say, I think everyone should have some sort of look into their cycle, regardless whether they're a business owner, a mum, they have their own job. I just think it's so important, and it doesn't always relate to business. It can just be right down to your well-being, or maybe why you yelled at one of your kids, or all the little things that we take for granted, don't we? We don't listen to our bodies, and when we don't listen, that's when we know we probably should have had another hour in bed, but we got up early because we were told that being up at 5 a.m. is the way forward, which, don't get me wrong, can be, but I think just listening to your body and taking those steps, and even something like the Aura Ring would be a big kind of step forward with minimal effort from you, really, in terms of technology. You just let that do its work. But yeah, just a huge thanks, Renee, for the your Psycho Advantage. It's been transformational, and I just love the fact that there's so many different ways to do what we do in business as women, and I think that's really important to spread that word out there. So much so. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. I have loved every little bit of it. I've loved just having you a part of our community and to be able to connect with you and see how you're integrating everything and how it's making those shifts and changes for you. And I would love for anybody that's listening that would love to learn more about all the amazing things you talked about that you're doing in the world. Where can they go find you?
Oh, it's really easy. So I'm on social media as Mind Marvels everywhere. But yeah, our website's mindmarvels.com. So just very nice and easy.
Awesome. So I would highly encourage everybody with kids, young kids, go check her out, kind of see what she has going on there. As far as, like I said, it's so important for you to teach your kids about self-regulation, about emotion, about knowing some of these tools and resources that we probably are integrating and learning now, that if we teach our kids when they're really young, it'll just become this automatic, easy thing for them, and not something that we have to carve out and make such a big deal about learning. It'll just be so simple for them. So such a powerful thing. I will make sure that we have all of it linked up in the show notes and all of those types of things. And I hope you all have a fabulous rest of your day.
Thank you.